What's going on, everybody? This week we are covering what does it mean when a house is sold as is as to it not being sold as is. We're going to cover what are the perks for a seller, what are the disadvantages for a seller, what are the perks for a buyer, and what are the disadvantages for a buyer. So to start off with, a house being sold as is basically the seller's way of saying up front they give no representation as to the condition of the property or give any warranties as to the condition of the property. So let's dive into it. What are the advantages for a seller? If you do sell your house as is, naturally you are telling the world, hey look, I'm not negotiating any repairs on this property, or am I giving you any inclination of to the condition of the property. If you're going to have an inspection, it is strictly for your informational purposes only. Don't come to me and ask me to fix something. You're also stating that, hey, any inspections you do are the cost of you as the buyer themselves. In our contract, the buyers do pay for their home inspection and any inspection other than if the seller has a well and septic. So they will do a septic inspection, and they will also do a well water test, and the seller typically has to pay for those items, okay? The seller will also be responsible for doing the termite inspection. You're basically saying, hey, look, I'm not doing any of those. If you want to buy my house, you're going to handle taking care of those things. I don't want to deal with the headache, essentially. So to go along with the advantages, there's obviously a disadvantage, right? The disadvantage would be you are right off the bat going to cut the amount of buyers that are even willing to consider looking at your home. And typically, right off the bat, you might as well expect to get less for your house than if you were not going to sell it as is. The reason for that is, if I'm a buyer and I'm putting an offer in on your house and we come to an agreement, I would like to know that if there's something majorly wrong with your house, you're going to fix it prior to me purchasing it. Another disadvantage would be if you get your house under contract, that purchaser more than likely is going to have a loan. If they do have a loan through a bank, they're going to have to get an appraisal done. Appraisal required repairs can come into play with some loans, especially VA and FHA loans, who tend to have stricter appraisals done on them per the conditions because they're putting less money down. So you have to be careful accepting contracts with those loans because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you go through 30 days of this, being under contract, working towards closing, appraisal comes back and they want you to fix a bunch of stuff that you're basically said up front you're not going to fix. Another disadvantage that we have seen with some sellers that we have represented is, even though they've listed their house as is, after a buyer comes in and does their inspection and determines the amount of money that they think it's going to cost to fix, they will end up coming back and trying to beat up the seller on the price and try to get them to come down even lower. So you got to kind of weigh those odds for yourself. I mean, if you're a seller and you really just don't want to deal with the hassle of it, and the house is in really bad shape and it's just an obvious thing, hey, sell it as is, don't deal with the headache. Just let the world know, hey, look, if you're coming to buy my house, you're getting it in the condition it's in right now, and we'll negotiate the price. Now, what are some of the advantages for a buyer who's buying an as-is house? Well, typically out of the gate, you're going to probably get the house for cheaper, plain and simple, because most of them do need work associated with it. And especially if you're the type that likes a fixer-upper and you want to make the house your own and you want to do some custom work to the house, it's right up your alley. When you do the initial showing of the house, you go through, you take a look at the house, you get a good feel for how much it's going to cost you to get the house where you want it. You can kind of assess where you want your offer to come in at. Then you can have your inspection done and you'll know, okay, was I right on target or was I way off? And you can kind of make your decision based on there whether you want to proceed forward with that purchase. So what are some of the disadvantages? The disadvantages would naturally be if you're an FHA or a VA buyer, the appraisers are going to be stricter if you're getting a mortgage. So you run into a situation where obviously if you get the house under contract for a price that you feel is fair, and then at that point you get the appraisal done, if there are appraisal required repairs and that seller has told you flat out they're not fixing it, well, you as the buyer are then going to probably end up taking the risk to make those repairs prior to closing and you owning the house, just so the deal can close and you can purchase the home. Another disadvantage for you buying a house as is, if you're buying a house that's out in the country, you like that peace and quiet, okay? If it's got a well and septic, you're going to be responsible for those inspections as well as the termite, okay? Now, when you go throwing in your home inspection, the well water test, the septic inspection, as well as termite, you're going to be upwards of $1,000 to have all those inspections done. So you've got more money at risk just to find out if you want to purchase the property. If you get into some of those inspections, like the septic, and there are major issues, the seller has already told you they're not going to fix them. So you then have to really weigh, is it worth it? Because septic inspections and septic repairs can be extremely costly. Well water, not too bad. It's usually pretty easily treatable. As for the termite inspection, it kind of falls in the same territory, where the inspection is definitely not as much money. It costs very little, usually under $100. You're going to run into, okay, does this house have a ton of damage? And if it does, you then have to make a decision whether you want to proceed with purchasing or not. So guys, that's just some of the main highlights of the advantages and disadvantages to dealing with an as-is sale. Obviously, every situation is different, and based on your personal situation on how you want to move forward on a house can vary. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys can think of any other topics you'd like me to cover in videos, please leave it down in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to add it to the list. We got a couple lined up that we're planning on doing. I think they're going to be pretty informative. See you guys on the next one.